do the live here first. Okay, so we're live now. So yeah, I make both of you co-host.
Yeah, if you make me co-host, that would be great too.
Okay.
Are you doing any PowerPoint or something, Paul?
No, I'll share the screen a little bit, but not much.
Okay, so you're both co-hosts now, and we're live.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so then when we let people in at 7 o'clock,
Yeah.
I just make the announcement and I give it over to you guys then. And at the end, I take it back and we can also do the Q&A.
Yeah, and also, Paul, I will just just say that we've been collaborating for many years.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah.
then-
You do your normal introduction. That's fine.
And then
Don't worry.
take over.
Don't worry. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. So I'm going to, I think it just need to, only thing I need to do is find it on Facebook so we can change this here. Okay, here there's pages. Okay, we're on time. Okay, we got 2 minutes. I have to do it manually here, but it's going.
There's 22 waiting.
Yeah, don't worry about it. Oops, okay. Let them in at 7 o'clock. Okay.
So 1 more minute, right? 1 more minute.
Yes, give me 1 second. This one is done. Okay, so now we can let people in 25 seconds. 15 seconds. Then we could give it about 3 minutes or so, before we start and see how.
Yeah, but when can we admit?
In 2 seconds.
Okay.
Now it's emitting, so it just goes automatically. Good morning, everybody.
Jorgen, hello.
Hi, good
Hello,
morning,
Marika.
Stephen.
Hi, hello. Hi, Ed.
Hi.
Permanezca en línea. La emisión está comenzando.
Mute your microphones, please.
Oh, that's fine. Let's leave the microphone. We can leave it loud till I will do everyone muting when we start. So at least people can say hello to each other. So it'll be fine.
Hello, everyone. Please say hello.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, hello.
Hello, hello from
Hello.
Alaska.
Hello
from
from
New York.
Washington.
Okay.
Wow.
Hi from Jordan.
Hi.
Hello from
Good to
Jordan.
see you.
Hi from Guatemala.
Good.
Buenos dias.
Nice to hear voices around the world.
Hi, I am from Pakistan.
Hi, good morning,
Hey,
Pakistan.
Pakistan.
Welcome, Pakistan.
I'm from Montreal.
Thank
Hey.
you.
Wow, beautiful city.
Montreal.
Bonjour.
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 Good, good, very good.
Okay, so let's talk about the weather. Alaska is cold, wet, and rainy. We are probably 43 degrees.
That's not too bad for Alaska, isn't it?
No.
I don't-
It's our winter.
Okay, it's sunny right now here in Hawaii, and it's about 80 or so. So
No fair.
I'm sorry.
It's always sunny.
Yeah, it's always sunny. Most of the time, at least.
We're having a happy spring day today
Good.
in the coast.
Hello, I'm Murtala from Nigeria.
Good
Hello.
morning, Murtala.
Hello.
Welcome.
Evening.
Yeah, just keep on telling us where you're calling from, and just
Hi.
make
Sorry.
know who you are. Yes,
Hi, Deborah from Barbados in the Caribbean.
Oh, beautiful.
Wonderful.
Deborah from the Caribbean. Nice weather.
Wonderful.
I'm Ed Movius from Rockville, Maryland.
Wonderful.
Maryland, welcome.
Hi, Ed. Hi.
Okay, so give it a 15 seconds and we can start here. So we're live now everywhere. Okay, great.
It's nice to see all the different backgrounds of your homes and offices.
So I'm going to mute everybody, and then when you wanted to ask questions later or to Q&A, you can not physically, you just raise your hand. There's a little button when you go to participants, and that would give us the indication that you wanted to say something. Okay, so I'm going to mute everybody, and we can get going. Aloha and good morning. My name is Jürgen Steinmetz, and I'm joining you from Livestream.travel and eTurboNews in Honolulu. And today we're here with and for the World Tourism Network, and coming to you with a really interesting program. And I will introduce in just a second Marikar and Paul. They're joining us from the US East Coast and take over our storytelling tour guide session today. Just before we start, I wanted to remind everybody we are live right now, so you can watch us on every page at eTurboNews and any of our other publications and our partners around the world. You can also see us on Livestream. And if you wanted to be part of this live audience, you can still do this. Just simply go to worldtourismevents.com, worldtourismevents.com, and you find this listed, so you can still register and actually be part of the live audience right now. If you are not part of the live audience and you wanted to watch us later, if you came in late, all of this will be on livestream.travel later, or you can go to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/travelnewsgroup. And of course, you can always connect from World Tourism Network. If you're not yet a member of the World Tourism Network, please become a member. We have both free and we have paid options, and you can simply go to WTN.travel, or you can go to worldtourismnetwork.org. Either way, same website, and join us. We would really like to welcome to our group of people now in 127 countries, engaging in the rebuilding.travel discussion. And we have many more events like this coming up you can be part of. For instance, our next event is on Saturday, and that's kind of almost getting into a personal fair, because we're going to meet my friend Holger Timrek, who currently lives in Peru. He's from Germany originally, and he has an incredible story to tell. And I was part of this story. He escaped in the 80s from what it was at that time, the German Democratic Republic, East Germany to West Germany. And he will tell you about how this all came apart, how he ended up spending 2 years in prison and got to the West and eventually got married in Peru and now lives in Lima. So it's an incredible story. You don't want to miss it. That is on Saturday. And then we have another event coming up next week before the end of the month from TUI. TUI is one of the largest tour operators in Europe, and they have an opportunity to assist businesses through these crises. So you want to hear about this. So without further ado, I wanted to give the microphone to our good friend Marika, who also is the chairman of our interest group for tour guiding. And that's what we do at WTN. We have interest groups from different section of our business, and you can become, once you become a member, also a member of this interest group. If you want to see what interest groups we have, just go to WTN.travel and click on interest groups. But Micah, the floor is yours now, and I know you will introduce Paul, who's going to be taking the lead in a minute.
Sure. So thank you again, Jürgen, for hosting our event. We're so grateful that we have connected and that we're very active with the broadcasting. And this is a great platform for us tourist guides to have a voice and to tell our story, because we need that. In a global family, we need to have a voice to communicate to the people. So this is one of the many platforms that we have. So today we're very honored to have Paul Costello, who has been working with me for many, many years. He has been my guest speaker. He has been my good friend. He has been my advisor. He has written my story too that I have put into YouTube. So Paul and I have collaborated in many ways. So today he's going to tell us a way to create memories, perhaps in a digital world, Paul. Perhaps that's the challenge. But yeah. Paul is here to give us a lot of insight. So prepare any questions or thoughts that you might want to bring to the forum after he talks, and we'll be happy to converse. So Paul, thank you for coming, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Marika. Thank you so much. Thank you. Welcome, everybody. So as Marika and Jürgen, thank you, Jürgen, for this. What a wonderful audience you create around the world. I love this audience. This is the most international audience that it's such a privilege to have people from around the world to having this conversation. I always tell my American friends that they can tell by my accent that I'm not a local and that I come from the deep South. I don't just come from the South, but I come from the deep South. And if you look on a map of the world, the deep South, it happens to be Australia, south of the equator. That's where my origins are. But I'm interested in what you might have been interested in, and by advertising this seminar around creating memories. So as a little bit of preparation for you folks, if you've got a pen and paper, that might be helpful. But I want you to sort of we're going to use our own research here as a group who are so experienced in travel. And I'm interested, once we get started, I'm interested in your memories of the most memorable travel experiences. Now, we could be here all day and all night sharing that, but I just want you to trigger your memories. What is before we share, what are your memories of, and they can be good memories and they can be terrible memories, but if you've asked yourself, if you had a minute to share a most memorable travel experience, that would be something we could dip into and just see whether what I'm saying makes any sense in terms of analyzing that. The second thing is I want you to think of any questions. Some of you have sent questions in before, and that would be great just to start the session with a question and just see. Maybe write the question down and see if we get to it, or put the question in the chat box and we can sort of look at it. But I just want you to sort of come curious. Maybe there's something in your mind that's not in my mind, and you will trigger some creative energy here in conversation. So think about a memorable travel experience and think of the question you're bringing, and then we'll get to that in a second. So let me just give you a little bit of background as to why this question even popped up for me, because I think it's I think it's probably thinking about travel and tour in a different way. Usually we're caught up in the moment, planning, and our bus is going to arrive on time, and is the hotel accommodation. We're so caught up in the necessities of the moment that I don't know whether we often think longer term as to, if we're going to have 5 days in Paris, there's enough to worry about to have 5 days in Paris to be not thinking about what is going to be the memory of this experience in 5 years' time. So it's a little bit of a different way of thinking about it, but I think it might illuminate some understanding that might help practically in the way we design things. And for a lot of you who experience this, I think some of this stuff you do intuitively. I don't know necessarily I'm telling you anything new, but maybe if you discover through this that you're pretty competent in yourself, you're doing some things that the brain already is telling us that we should be. So just by way of introduction, let me just tell you how I got concerned about memory. A lot of my work has been in international peace work. So 25 years ago, I was working with young people from Northern Ireland, the Catholic and Protestant communities in Belfast and Derry, Londonderry, and what was known as the Troubles. And thousands of people were killed in that. And we ran a program, which is still running, which would bring these young leaders to Washington and give them 8 weeks of an intense experience, Catholics and Protestants. And for many of them, it's the only shared experience they'd ever had as two tribes that usually back home are fighting each other. And my intention was that my sense was if the program worked, it wasn't just that they had a good time in the 8 weeks that they were here in Washington working on Capitol Hill and they were working in the Clinton president's office and so on. They were doing some amazing things. For me, the criteria of success was not what they experienced in the moment, but how they would remember it. Because Northern Ireland did not have a memory much of Catholic and Protestants working and sharing together and leading together. So that was the long-term purpose around saying, I'm here not just creating an experience, I'm really creating a memory. So if you transfer that to our work with travel and tour, I think we can all understand that we create a wonderful experience for the people who sign up. But just imagine if we were creating memories that lasted, and that would mean that gave enduring value to our work. People would think of us and they'd think of how wonderful we set up the whole travel tour itinerary. They will tell their friends, we'll get return business, we'll build a reputation. In a way, the memory of what we do probably has far more value than the absolute experience of what we do in the moment, if that makes sense to you. So, and if there's bad memories, if people have bad memories of some of the experiences, they're not going to come back to us. So it works both ways. So I'm just thinking if we flipped a little bit and started thinking about what memories do we have of travel? What memories are we creating? Do we ever do, when we ask our clients later, what do they remember most? What do they tell us? But let me pause for a second and just ask anybody, just briefly, if I say to you this question, what are some of the most memorable little moments of travel and touring that you have yourself? If anyone would like to share, just briefly, what's a memory that immediately comes to mind?
Paul, I have some responses here on the chat already. So
okay.
Would you like me to read them to you?
Yeah, if in a minute, but would anyone like to, Ed or Jürgen or Alan or John, can anyone like just quickly, what's a memory that immediately springs to mind about travel and tour?
Yeah, I can give a quick memory of seeing the total eclipse in Idaho 3.5 years ago. We drove 400 miles from Billings to Boise, spent the night there. We got up at 4 o'clock, drove to Columbus. We expected to see very large crowds, and there were only a few people there. And we waited. We had our goggles and our special glasses. And then it was almost surreal as we watched it become dark, and then it became almost 90% dark. And I recorded the whole thing on my video camera. And then to see the corona, and when it was dark, I could take off the special lens for my camera and take a nice picture.
Beautiful.
And so I had
Beautiful.
seen one eclipse when I was in Minnesota when I was 10 years old. So those were lifelong memories.
Okay, so let's hold that. Let's think of that. Let's come back to that. Thank you. Thank you. Somebody else, what's a memory that jumps out at you about a travel or tour experience you've had?
Well, from
Mary,
my
Yuri,
end, Paula,
Jürgen?
yes, from my end, Paula, I can say one of my most memorable was right here in Hawaii when I already lived here 20 years. And the first time drove up to Mauna Kea, what is our largest volcanic mountain on the Big Island. And you go from altitude 0 to, in meters, I know most of you are from outside the US, to about 4,500 meters. And I was traveling as my tour guide with my young nephew, who was 17 years at that time. And we were driving up there, and I thought, oh my God, I'm getting dizzy. And we had the first stop, we had to drink like 1 gallon of water. I had to use the bathroom, I had to get out. And I was telling my nephew, maybe you have to drive pretty soon. He was laughing, and I thought to myself, if you know how serious I was. But once we made it up to the mountain, it was the most humble and fascinating view I've ever seen in my entire life. I will never forget this. When you look down to the clouds and look down the mountains and see the bright blue sky and this entire feeling, you feel like you really have something achieved once you get up to that mountain. So for me, this was probably the most memorable experience I had in my travel.
Thank you, Jürgen. Yeah, nature. Wow. But all right, so we've had an eclipse and we've had this mountain experience that Jürgen had in the top of the mountain. Anybody else? One more, maybe. Who else would like to share?
Okay,
yeah, go for it, Huri.
I was actually guiding a VIP group to Niagara Falls, Canada.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, at one point, the leader who was paying for everything, very rich gentleman, came and said they would like to take the helicopter ride. To which I said, certainly, I will call and of course schedule one. Now, the issue is, he looked at me, he said, yes, you do so, and make sure that we fly behind the waterfall. I know, I can see it on your face. Yeah. So, I tried to explain, but no, we were getting absolutely nowhere. And we got to a point where I had to say, but of course, if you'd like, it can be arranged, I'm quite certain. However, it will be a one-way flight, sir.
It's beautiful.
I love it.
Beautiful. Wonderful. All right. So I'm sure all of you have other memories, but even those three, just like, Huri's story is a story as a memory, and it's a funny story, but it's a sort of alarming story, and it comes from the clients that she was tour guiding with and directing. Both the other two are about nature and something wonderful like an eclipse or looking at a mountain and a view, a vista, seeing the whole picture. So you just think there's certain clues here about how the brain somehow latches on to some experiences and retains them and builds on them and loves to retell them. Whereas other experiences, they float away. They're good in the moment. But somehow or other, they don't sort of stay around. So I guess the argument I'm wanting to make is, and then going to tap into some of the science here, some of the brain science, is that we measure success often by our profits and our metrics and, Washington, 20 million visitors, that's pretty good. A few years ago, 10 years ago, it may have been only 15 million visitors. We look at the metrics, that's how we measure success. But I'm going to suggest to you another way of looking at this, just like I did with those peace programs in Northern Ireland, is like think of the tour you love to give, or the travel itinerary, the country that you love to show people, you know, Scotland or Ireland or Germany or Switzerland. Think of the tour thing that you just love. And then to think about success as the story / memory that those people will tell about the experience you created for them in 5 years' time. And just to think that if, I often say, if you happen to be, maybe you've done a tour of London, you've taken people to London and all the sites, and that's great. And then say 10 years later, you happen to be back in London in a pub in Paddington, and you overhearing some people that you recognize were on your tour, and they're telling the story of the trip that you conducted for them. And just imagine, what would be the sort of story that you would like to hear that would tell you that you were spot on, that you really, it worked, that you really gave them a memorable experience, a lifetime experience, something they'll never forget. So it might have been, you know, so you imagine what that story is. You know, remember we went to the Tower of London and we saw these beef eaters and they're wearing their red suits, and the crows. Who could ever imagine that the crows of the Tower of London are officially officers of the Royal Guard? They have commissions. It's so extraordinary. We never knew that. So on and so on and so on. So I ask people to think, even in planning now, when you think about your planning, you know what that story is. You don't have to tell me, but you know the kind of story that you want them to share, and then organize it. So imagine that that's the end, the goal, the success story, and then let's roll it backwards. Let's backwardly engineer that and say, if they're the sort of stories I want my travel people to tell in a year, 5 years, 10 years time, if that's what I want them to be able to continue to enjoy, the enduring value of what we're offering our folks who come on our tours and stuff, then let's design it that way. Let's make it a project of design. That in a sense, a lot of the time it's happenstance. A lot of the time it's by accident. A lot of the time there's no way we can predict some of those most memorable moments, but there's lots of things we can predict by the way we design something. And I always kind of say, so let's turn hindsight into foresight by insight. Let's plan this, and let's draw from some of the research that's coming to us from neuroscience and others around this, around how we organize an experience. So here's a proposition. So I'll give you the problem, give you just to get you to think practically about this. I used to have the Irish and the South African and then the Israeli and the Palestinians in Washington for 8 weeks. And there would always be a trip to New York. And half of them had never been to New York before. So the question in my mind is, maybe there's an economy about it, but the question always in my mind is, this 8 weeks, when do I take them for their weekend in New York? Do I do it at the beginning? Do I do it in the middle? Or do I do it at the end, if the purpose is to create a lingering and lasting memory? Or you've got a tour group in Paris and they've got 5 days, and you're going to do the Louvre, and you're going to do the Eiffel Tower, and you're going to do, you know, you're going to do the Tuileries Gardens, and you're going to do Versailles, and you're going to do the left bank. You're going to do all those. Should you be thinking about an order to that? Should you be just day 1, day 2, day 3? Should there be some rationale as to Eiffel Tower at the beginning so they see the whole of Paris, or Eiffel Tower at the end so they can sum it up, or in the middle, where? Because one of the research tells us about design, narrative design, that says that the experience matters in terms of the sequence, that the sequence matters. And there's more research done on this that I could share with you, but it's around, there's a book by Daniel Kahneman called Thinking Fast and Slow, who talks about what they call the primacy effect and the recency effect. And what they mean is that some things are better remembered if they happen at the beginning, and some things are better remembered if they happen at the end. And so playing with that, I'm going to check in with you now for a second and see whether this is, you probably do this, but like 5 days in London, 5 days in France, 5 days in the Rhineland, 5 days in southern France, touring the vineyards. What goes on in your mind around the sequencing? How do you begin the tour? What do you put in the middle, and what do you put at the end? Can I just get any feedback on that before we move into our next material? How do you use that? Does that inform your planning process? Anybody? Would anyone like to share?
If I may, I'd like to go again.
Go for it, yeah.
And to be very honest, I always allow myself the first day. Because, as guides, we ask questions and we try to get as much information about the group as possible. But never, never does that information prepare us to the reality of the group.
Right.
So usually I rather have a city tour, the local city tour the first day, and have my time with them to know them, to see, and to, of course, really get into knowing them. And that actually dictates how I plan the rest of the trip.
Huri, that's wonderfully insightful, and I'll come back to that in a second. But that's great. Who else would like to share? What goes into, think about beginnings? How do you begin your tour? What goes into that decision? Anybody else? Alan or John or Maria or Mary? Anybody else like to share? Like, I'm not telling you. Go, yes, Mistral.
Mistral.
So, as a tour manager, it's very important to, when we set up the tours Monday through Sunday, could be at the beginning as a wow, as an impression of the experience that will come in the following stops, or could be at the end as the last memory of their experience. I think it's very important to have, beside of creating that experience is important, but at the same time, the memory that you just implemented on here, it's very, very important. So both, I would say, will go for.
Absolutely, absolutely. Anybody else? Thank you, Mistral. And Mistral can be cheating because you and I, we worked together before on this. So anybody else thinking about beginnings particularly?
Hello?
There's Viola raising her hand.
Mary, yes.
33 years in San Francisco. I did 14 Western states, Canada, and Mexico in my heyday. Two tours were alike. And that question is difficult because no two tours are alike. We've all been told you don't start talking about something unless it's 10 feet in front of you because you're not on the same wavelength. But just as the previous woman just said, I started my tour with the city tour, and then the very next day we're on the road doing 7-day tour of Northern California. So you give an overview in the city tour of San Francisco. And then at the very end, we're going to do Sacramento into Lake Tahoe, wine country, whatever. And I would leave that story about that destination to that particular time because they've read their brochure, they know what to expect. And it's those little memories created every day, no 2 days are alike, that at the very end, they're very well satisfied that something piqued their aha moment when I recapped it on that final day, Carmel 17-mile drive back into San Francisco and to the airport. So take it day by day or tour by tour and let each day have its own memory and recap it, but never start talking about Lake Tahoe, which is 3 days away.
Right.
So I'm officially climbing that 7,000 feet elevation.
Right. Wonderful. Wonderful. There's a lot of insight in there, but just to come back to the three sharings there. So, so that Hori, the first sharing, brain science will tell us really that while we think that, you know, they're remembering Lake Tahoe because it's them and that place, for example, it's not. Memory is social. And the chances of building the memory is building it together. The audience, so that what you said, Huri, about the first day, making the connection between you and the guests and connecting the guests to the guests is creating the net to capture the memories and increasing your chances of those memories being told and retold and retold. So in terms of building memories, it's not about the place, it's about the people and the connection. The connection to the place is because of the connection to each other.
Right.
And often it's the reunion. People will come together and say, remember Mary took us to take Tahoe and told us about this. So that memory is social. It's not a machine. It's not a tape recorder. So if your tour isn't creating that connection, you're making it less chance that people are going to remember that. The second thing about what Mary is saying is each day is its own, like creating its own, designing each day as if it was the whole tour with a beginning and a middle and an end. Yeah. Because what Kahneman's book, which is Thinking Fast and Slow, the revelation he has, which it's quite startling to me, but it's like that the experiencing brain is different from the remembering brain. So you show people Paris, the way they experience Paris is going to be sort of different from the way they remember Paris. But that given that the experience will fade away into something else unless we get them to tell that story. So for example, on the bus going from A to B, tell them to talk to each other, tell them to share, tell them to express. There's a famous, I guess it's Aristotle, if it's not expressed, it's not impressed. It doesn't go inside unless it's somehow expressed. So allowing time. So sometimes I think our tour guiding business, we cram so much in and there's no time to digest it, no time to reflect on it, to take pictures and look at the pictures, reflect and build and build and build, which is where maybe later on we can talk about this, where the technology can do a lot to help us as well as get in the way. But it's like, so Kahneman says the experiencing self is different from the remembering self. And I go one further, that for tour guiding, I think it's really important to remember, we experience in parts and we remember in wholes. I'll say that again. We experience in parts and we remember in wholes, because the memory is looking back. We've had the whole experience. I did a tour of Ireland 5 years ago, and I often meet with these folks, and you know, we started in the West Coast and stuff. So like day by day, we built this tour. But now when I talk to them, it's like each memory comes out of the context of the whole experience, So in terms of, let me go into a little bit more detail here around the way I think about it is beginning, middle, end. And I think of them as energy zones. I think of them as zones of opportunity, so that the beginning is the energy of creativity At that beginning, the first encounter, when they get on the bus, when you meet them in the lobby of the hotel, there's only really one beginning. It's like, it's fresh energy. Anything's possible. And they've come with all sorts, maybe they haven't, but the more they've come with anticipation, the more they're eager and hungry and excited to take what you've got. So again, part of building the memory is, how much time do you spend building anticipation? You know, I mean, how Hollywood does. Hollywood makes a movie for 30 million and spends 50 million advertising it before it's released. They know how to build anticipation because they know that you've got to build it up, build it up. So beginning is the energy of creativity and possibility. The ending is the energy of completion. You tie up the ends, like completion. You know, not too much new material. Like let's help them create this memory of how things are going to fit together as they leave the experience. And in the middle, I always say it's complicated. The middle is going to get complicated. It should be engaging and re-engaging. But you know, if you lose them in the middle, don't worry so much. Just have a strategy of regathering them, so that in your tour, somewhere in the middle, there needs to be a little space where you have time out, they have time out, and we regroup and just reconnect the beginning and the end, because it's going to get lost in the middle, and not to panic about that. You see, the memory, what is again the thing that Kahneman is saying, and I summarize it this way: memory does not remember duration. It remembers the dynamics. It does not remember the duration, which is interesting because, you know, like the COVID-19, it's interesting how that's going to be remembered, how we're going to remember that in 5 years' time, because it's been a year or so of really tough, but it's been the same. So it's like not a lot of dynamic, a lot of duration, but not a lot of dynamic. So it's going to be interesting how history, our memories are going to experience that. But take that map and put it over your tour guide or your travel guide or your planning. And then the question becomes, does my beginning seize the energy of possibility in a way that helps create that imprint of memory? And does my ending do the job of completion, wholeness, satisfaction? Because the ending of the experience is the first draft of their memory. The ending is the first draft of their memory. And so the middle, okay, the middle can be, well, you know, we cram a lot of things in the middle. Come back to that earlier question I asked you. See if you can think, I've got 8 weeks with these young people who are usually enemies, Israel, Palestine, Northern Ireland, Catholic, Protestant, so on. Where do you think I would put New York, the trip to Times Square and Broadway and New York? Where do you think I would put that in the 8 weeks? Anyone have any guesses? Where do you think it would plug into beginning, middle, and end on an 8-week experience that I want them to remember? Any hunches?
Mary, in the middle, Paul?
Mm-hmm. Say a bit more, Mary.
Yes, in the middle.
Why would you say that?
Well, because you're working with a diverse group, a lot of yin and yangs. And in the middle, when you think you're losing them, you're dangling the carrot. New York City is your ultimate prize in this 8-week vacation or seminar. And everybody has heard so much, yada, 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 and you're going to bring them back. We're working towards a goal here, and that's New York.
Wonderful. Anybody else comment on that? Because you're spot on. You see, in my narrative design, and if people are new, if you've got a group that's never been to France before in their lives, then the newness, the novelty and the anticipation will carry them through the first, that beginning phase if it's new. And doesn't mean you shouldn't design it, but
I can't hear her.
Hello? Okay, everyone, can you still hear me? You can. So when I bring these groups to Washington, they've got the Washington Monument, the Lincoln Memorial, Congress. They've got so much that's amazing and new and exciting. So I don't need to boost that. It's just the natural process of it. But in the middle, as you say, I'm going to lose them. They're going to get ratty. They're going to fall back into their old habits. They're going to get to know each other more personally. And sometimes it's going to grate on them. So in the middle, coming towards the end, New York fits in to be the booster. It's the final, like, I'm going to bring these folks home and we're going to inject energy when the system's energy is low. So again, when you're looking at your narrative design of things, beginning creative and ending is completion, but in the middle it sags, and somehow or other a booster. What's the booster experience that's maybe if it's a long tour, people are just naturally tired, then somehow like a New York thing is just a shot in the arm to bring us home. So the conclusion from that to me is something that I never used to do way back. I used to manage time, and we all taught to be managers of time, but now I'm a manager of energy. I'm not a manager of time. I'm a manager of energy. And I think that can be applied to Zoom talks and everything else. Managing energy and where people are at and how you know that, we're in the middle coming towards the end of this presentation. And it's almost like I almost need to, if I had the chance or if I had the skills, I'd get up and play my fiddle or do a dance or jump on the table because we're in the middle and some of you are multitasking and it's late in the afternoon in some places in the world. So let me stop there for a second and just summarize and then see if I can get any questions or comments. So that somehow the brain science will tell us that we experience in parts, but we remember in wholes. And so if we're going to be building a memory, we need to be focusing on how the part fits into the whole. And even if we haven't taken them to Lake Tahoe until day 3, what they do on day 1, somehow it has to fit into something. And I know some of you, you're very good at like the theming. You set up a theme at the beginning. But we talked about beginning as the energy of creativity and possibility. So a lot of the times, don't waste that by just giving instructions. The bus is going to be 21, it's blue. We need to be here a quarter of an hour before the bus leaves. Please put your bags in. If we spend the first 30 minutes of that precious time giving instructions, sometimes we've stepped on the moment. We've totally stepped on the moment when they're ready to hear, they're hungry and eager. So sometimes some of that stuff needs to be done in a separate way. It's like, do that as the prologue and then have the fanfare. Now we're starting. The start, boom, like a Grand Prix. It's charge it with energy. It has that moment and people are going to remember it. The chances, particularly if people are new to something, the chances of their having positive memories of it increase significantly if the beginning is very positive, if the beginning is very powerful rather than low key. Then the middle gets complicated. Energy's going to dip. We're going to need a booster shot somewhere there. And at the end, the completion energy, because in the end, how it ends is what it is, really, is what Kahneman's argument is. He tells this lovely story of a friend who I think went to a concert of Beethoven's Ninth, and it was a brilliant concert up until the last 3 minutes when, I don't know, the conductor tripped or something happened in the last 3 minutes. And his friend said it was a terrible concert. It was terrible. And the answer was, why was it terrible? Because in the last 3 minutes, the conductor tripped or got sick. It was like, but up until the last 3 minutes, it was a glorious concert. Isn't that interesting? And the research says, like, if you're going to have a negative experience in your tour guiding duration, please, please, please make sure it doesn't happen at the end. That will kill you. If the negative experience happens at the end, if you lose the luggage or the bus breaks down or something goes wrong, pray, or plan enough leeway to recover. If it happens in the beginning, you can recover. If it happens in the middle, you can recover. But even like at the end, in a way, if you have limited resources, the brain would tell us, if you're going to want to create a really great memory, make sure you put full resources at the end, because that's what they're going to walk away with. And by that stage, they will have forgotten that you took them to the wrong hotel on day one in Paris, or that in day two it rained. They will have forgotten all that, because you threw them a banquet at Versailles on that last day, and you gave out awards, and you really, they will remember that trip for a lifetime. But you've been smart. You've been smart. You designed it as a memory, not just designed it as an experience. All right, some questions, feedback. Any, maybe Marika, over to you. What are you reading in the chat room? Is Marika there?
Yes, sorry. Mona, it said first and last impressions are so important. And Hope says it's so true. Knowing each traveler's preference and passion is key. Pamela, create a small celebration or gift for everyone before they leave for home. And Kat V, I care not about fancy cars or meals or clothes. My trips to 50 countries are my jewels. And Pamela again, we call it onboarding. Information sent in advance to not waste time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Melanie, I think it depends on the trip you are taking. For what purpose? Tourism, proposed travel, or business.
Mm-hmm.
Deidre from Ireland, most memorable at the end. The last memories last.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and let's see. South Africa, let's see. Dave Herb, going to San Juan as a 13-year-old to visit my uncle who lived there. The first time tasting coconut, first time on a plane. They allowed smoking back then. First time being brave enough to dive off the high board at the hotel. The first experience with tropical mosquitoes. That's his memory.
Wow. Yes. Yeah. I see somewhere there, somebody there said location dynamics. And sometimes, the thing's not, Mother Nature didn't lay out things in the sequence maybe that is going to fit the sequence of the memory making, which means then we've got to be creative around that. But I think, oh yeah, now Captains and Hope have got questions. So let's go to some questions. Captain Emmanuel or Hope?
Captain Emmanuel.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Can you guys hear me?
We can.
Yeah, we can hear you.
We can't see you.
Okay, very good. Oh, so sorry about that. I'm not going to use my video because it's going to reduce my bandwidth. So I'd rather have you hear my question because
That's
I'm
fine.
very
Go
much
ahead.
interested
Go ahead.
in Paul's response to this question. So, Paul, I want to take you on the comment you just mentioned in your about the not wasting time with instructions. Okay.
Yeah.
The departure time from the hotel room, the arrival time to hit the bus. Now, this is my question. In this post-pandemic world that we are now, how do you manage the energy in your tour group in such a way that your tour clients don't throw away all the safety protocols, the social distance, the wearing of face masks, in the middle of creating that energy? Because I did a tour December 2020 that we were at a water sports site that the on-site guide already informed us that there were no going to be water activities because there were no lifeguards on ground. But in the excitement of the whole tour, one of the kids in the tour group was about to jump in the water.
Wow.
And I just wish that we have spent more time talking to the kids or telling the parents to hold the kids along. We practically forgot about the kids and we almost had an incident. So while we are trying to keep the energy and create that very bright beginning, how do we now manage that with safety protocols and all the COVID-19 social distancing in this post-pandemic world that we are? Thank you.
Okay, that's a great question, and I'll hold that for a second. And then somebody else had their hand up. Who else had their hand up?
There was Hope. Hope is already on the spotlight, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Good evening.
Would it be okay for me to jump in here? If you guys just tell us where you are, it's easier for our listeners to understand where you're calling from. I don't know the last gentleman where he was calling from. But
okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes. Nope. Go ahead, Hope. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. I'm actually on from Nigeria. I'm on from Nigeria, and it's been very educative. It's been amazing. I've learned a lot of things. I love the part where you said we have to the excitement has to be carried along. Now there is I talked about the location dynamics. That's because sometimes I would use Nigeria, for instance, and maybe some parts of Africa. Our experiences are different. We have people who are naturally spontaneous, who want to have fun with a business they want to do in mind. So at the end of the day, we have a little challenge with holding people on a long tour. You talked about an 8 weeks arrangement. So people tend to do maybe short stays. Yeah. Now, my question is this. For somebody who, okay, let me say, because here everybody wants to have fun and still make money. That's the system, yeah. So for someone that has business in mind and still wants to have fun, and you talked about how not to waste the time boring people with talk so that at least let the fun pick up early enough. Now, sometimes the last caller talked about how somebody jumped into the water. Now, in some part of the world, you don't need to emphasize on some things, but for people in Africa or Nigeria, for instance, you might have to deliberately talk about some things so to avoid some embarrassment.
Right.
Now, so when you have people from different regions, imagine you have somebody from Nigeria, somebody from France, somebody from, so how do you manage that group and ensure that they all have different experience, but a wonderful story at the end of the day? Because now that's why I talked about the location dynamics, because we are different.
Well,
we have different experiences.
Absolutely, Hope. So let me summarize the two questions and see if I can respond. And maybe there's a similarity between the two. So the first question was, when you have you've got some groups that don't listen to the instructions and they don't wear masks and they don't socially distance, and how important those instructions are just for sheer safety. So let me make sure that I'm not telling you that you shouldn't do that or you shouldn't do the instructions. I just think it's the architecture of the time that you use. So that what I will do is, the beginning, I won't call it a beginning. I will just say, this is the prologue. You've got to do these instructions. Let me do these instructions. Maybe I do them in a different place. I don't do them when it's before they get on the bus or before we go somewhere else. I move location so that the beginning is, I always think it's the beginning of a Broadway show. Is it when you get into the audience and hear people talking? Is it when the lights go down? There are many, many, many beginnings, but the prize beginning when the experience is going to start is one that you should, I think, separate from the didactic or the instructions, which are really, really important, but you don't want them remembering your kind of stern command. Make sure you have to wear masks. All they're going to remember is that you're reminded of their stern father who was always giving them orders, and you're about to show them Niagara Falls. You want them to remember Niagara Falls. You don't want to give them trauma of their stern father. So I think it's a question of separation and a differentiation of how you spread the time. But I'm not saying not to do it. Absolutely, absolutely. You have to do it. You must do it. But I'm just saying that prime time, when you want to, the beginning is the theme and the excitement and the anticipation. It's the creative energy. So don't don't let one bleed into the other is what I'm saying. The second thing is Hope's question about the variety of location challenges, and you've got, maybe, I mean, Marika is the expert at this. Often she speaks so many different languages and has a mixed international group. I think you're right. You've got to count on the fact that the people are having a different experience of the same place. But what I think this science is telling us is that our brains are essentially wired the same way, that we all want exciting beginnings, and we all want to walk away from an experience feeling that it somehow hangs together, that it wasn't just 100 disconnected places that we saw. We went to 10 cathedrals. We went to 3 breweries. We went to 5 ruins. And like, okay, well, so what? I think that's not good for remembering. Somehow our role as tour guides and travel managers is, what's the coherent theme? And we maybe have to find that or draw it out of the folks. But we experience in parts and we remember in wholes. And I think we've got to design then the parts to somehow fit a whole if we're going to increase the chances of memory. I hope that sort of answers the question, and maybe some other questions here, because then I'll say a few more things. But any other questions or comments or thoughts? Is any of this making sense to you? As I say, I think a lot of you folks do this anyway, but I just wonder whether you're aware that you're tapping into your intuitive sense of how the brain works.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Hello.
Mm-hmm.
My name is Jalil Ahmed. My
Go
name
ahead.
is Jalil Ahmed. I'm from Pakistan.
Welcome.
Thank you very much. I was listening to your opening commentary. It was really interesting for me. I've been guiding since 20 years in Pakistan. And we have seen a lot of tough situation, like during war on terror and everything. But I just want to say that, as you rightly said, opening is very important.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a purposeful opening, like the timing of the instruction and the timing of entertaining your client is very important. That the selection of the time, and you have to prioritize the things, that which thing you have to speak at what time. For example, you are rushing towards the bus and you are telling them about wearing the mask and use the sanitizer and everything. But everybody is trying to get their seats. So that will create embarrassment for the whole group. So I would rather suggest to go for those things which are like compulsory. Everybody knows that it's a pandemic and we have to wear the mask and we have to like use the sanitizers. So if you are pushing the people towards that, so you're going to miss your own main theme. So your focus has to be more on your tour, entertaining the people. And the second thing you talk about, the closing. For me, in the middle, it's also very important. If you miss something in the opening, you have to cover up in the middle. And lastly, good closing is very important.
Right.
If you have an impactful closing, you have to sum up the things, because it's difficult to handle the large groups. For example, I'm sitting here in Pakistan, and if I get a group from, different countries and they have different, priorities and different mindsets. So obviously, this is a difficult situation for all of us. But in my opinion, closing at the right time and telling the people. But one more important thing is that we don't have to put on rules on their head all the times.
Mm-hmm.
If we tell them something through stories, for example, you have to put everything in a story. Facts and information are boring.